You can go ahead.
Just Namaste and greetings from Canada. We have all gathered here for CBD COP 15, and the event that we are going to start will talk about how faith-based natural lifestyle can help increase biodiversity and ecosystem restoration. We- We'll be sharing with you the excerpt from 64 plus cases of farms and eco communities of International Society for Krishna Consciousness, and Govardhan Eco Village, of course, is one of them. So, how are you feeling today? Would anyone like to volunteer?
I'm feeling happy. It's a Friday.
Thank you, Kamran.
Nice to be in good company.
Yeah, happy indeed. So, how about you? Extremely happy. Thank you for encouraging. Yeah, Wesley, how about you?
I'm feeling energized,
Wow.
maybe a little bit stressed.
Yeah, so Wesley is energetic and a bit stressed. I can completely understand. How about you, Carolyn? Yeah, good, excited, stressed. Yeah, a little bit of all of those feelings. And indeed, all of us are well connected with our own selves, trying to figure out how we are feeling today. And I'm sure one of the feelings which is very beautiful, that is being thankful or being grateful. So even though we all belong to different faiths, we have a lot of consistencies and we have a lot of things in common. And one of the things which resonates across all of the faiths is the feeling of gratitude for Mother Earth. And that's where, when we say gratitude to Mother Earth, the service comes in picture. So how do we serve Mother Nature better? And when we say that, what comes to forefront is the natural lifestyle and the eco communities who keep not only the togetherness in forefront but also nature in forefront. With this, I would like to um, begin the discussion with the panel that we have today. We have a great panel here representing the faith community of ISKCON. We have Gaurangaji, who is the governing body commissioner member at ISKCON, and same way we have Anuttamaji, who is also the GPC. And both of them share one thing which is very common at the senior leadership: the environmental consciousness and the on ground action that both of these leaders are leading at ISKCON. So, with this as a short introduction to the panel, we would like to go ahead with the discussion today. The first question that we have here, and I would request Gaurangaji to help us answer this particular question. When we say eco-theology and talking about the source of gratitude, where does this understanding or the principles of gratitude come from in the Vaishnav Hindu tradition?
Thank you, Dr. Aditi, and welcome to all of you for this panel discussion. In all faith traditions, the concept of gratitude has been underlined very significantly. The idea of gratitude comes from the fact that when we receive something, then we are expected to also give back. And therefore, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, there is a verse which says, कृतज्ञ कोनो सेवेत दुराराध्यम असाधुभि तम सुखाराध्यम रजुभि ananya sharanai nribhir, which means that for one in a faith tradition, without having sense of gratitude, it is not possible for them to progress in their particular faith tradition. Gratitude is one of the core principles. It's not a detail, it's an essential quality required for progressing in their particular faith tradition. So, the Bhagavad Gita explains that if those in faith traditions are focused on developing a relationship with the divine, it's a relationship between the individual soul and the supreme divine. That's what all faith traditions in different denominations are trying to accomplish. So we are speaking of relationship, and relationship is based on trust, and trust is based upon certain basic paradigms of exchange. And one of the core principles to establish trust is how I reciprocate when someone gives me something. So, all the faith traditions indicate that the entire creation is nothing but a relationship between three entities: the Supreme Divine, Ishvara, the individual soul, Jiva, and the third is Prakriti or nature. So the relationship between of the jiva, of the soul, with Ishwar, divine, and Prakriti, nature, it is at the core of all faith traditions. Gita adds two other dimensions, and the fourth dimension is called Kala, under the influence of time factor. And then the fifth is when the soul makes appropriate choices to act, then that action is known as karma. So all of the faith traditions are in one way or other speaking about these five principles: Ishwar, Jeev, Prakriti, Kala, Karma, God, soul, nature, time, and action or activity. So, therefore, when the soul is fully obsessed with exploiting and enjoying nature, thinking that this nature exists for my exploitation and enjoyment, I'm the proprietor, I'm the enjoyer, then that principle technically in Sanskrit is known as bhoga, or the principle of I am the enjoyer, I am the exploiter. The concomitant effect of that is chinta or anxiety. So exploitation and enjoyment results in a consciousness of anxiety. Then when the soul, because of association, because of getting connected with faith traditions, start seeing that actually nature is nothing but an energy of the supreme. So the soul looks up. So far the soul is looking down to enjoy, to enjoy, to enjoy. When the soul looks up and sees there is a supreme person to whom both me and nature belong, then the soul starts connecting. So that connection with the divine of the soul, technically in our tradition, is called yoga. Yoga is a common word, it's a popular word, but yoga literally means connection with the divine. And when that connection is made, then you see that actually nature and everything in nature belongs to Him. And whatever I'm receiving, earth, water, fire, air, ether, it's all coming from Him. So therefore, I must express my gratitude. That expression of gratitude on realizing that whatever I have is by His grace, that expression of gratitude is what is called as a prayer. And that prayer transforms the chinta or anxiety into chintan or meditation, or as the famous app Calm, the Calm app. So, calmness is experienced when the soul rekindles and rejuvenates its relationship with the Supreme. With that relationship, then looks at nature and performs activity with responsibility, not to exploit, not to enjoy, but starts acting as a trustee. So that's the idea of gratitude. Thank you.
So if we can, so if we can just say that it's an essential virtue, gratitude. Definitely the five dimensions which we should remember, which scriptures offer across the faith. The more knowledge about who we are and our connection with divine and nature, and definitely the yoga, which leads to the service, action, reciprocation for the gratitude with, for Mother Nature. Thank you so much, Gaurangji. Our next question would be to Anuttamaji. Uh, ISKCON was institutionalized in 1966, and this is our founder, Acharya Srila Prabhupada. And he put down seven objectives at ISKCON. Would you like to share what his vision was as a founder for the natural lifestyle, uh, as part of his vision for how the world should differently be like? So over to you.
Thank you very much. And it's an honor to be here at COP15 and with all of you. Thank you very much to be here. Just a few reflections. The ISKCON movement, which is a modern community based on the principles of Vaishnavism. Vaishnava tradition, as Karanga was speaking about some, emphasizes understanding that there is a supreme divinity or personality or God, and that we all have an individual relationship with God. When we lose that relationship, then we lose, as Karanga was explaining, our connection with the natural world we live in, because we forget where it's coming from, whose property is it. So when Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada came to America in 1965 and then later traveled around the world, he was 70 years of age. And he'd been asked by his teacher to bring this tradition around the world. Actually, he was asked to do that as a very young man, and then he was married at the time, and he took care of his family, did what he could in India. But then at a later age, he took sannyas, which is the ashram of a renunciate. And then again, at the age of 70, boarded the ship to come to America with no financial support, no institutional support, no connections whatsoever. But he's had a fairly significant impact on on the world, as you're going to hear more about as far as our eco communities. But he particularly, one of the things that he emphasized, and as you mentioned, he identified seven primary purposes. One of those was to teach a simpler, more natural way of life. And this was in 1966. There wasn't a lot of people talking about a simpler, more natural way of life in 1966. There were a lot of, at least in the States where he was initially, the issues were the Vietnam War, the issues were the draft and things like that. But he was saying at the very beginning, we need to live more in a natural way in terms of our relationship with the world around us. So he prioritized that, and he really gave the seed for what we're going to be talking about in a few minutes, which is these 64 eco farms have been established around the world. And it's based on his vision. In fact, the New Vrindavan community we'll talk about in a minute in North America was the first that he founded. And he went and spent, considerable time there, and was really teaching that if we do prioritize spirituality in life, we need at least some of our time needs to be in nature to remind us of who we are and what our natural connection is. And when people don't do that, I was reading a study recently, was talking about prisoners, and when people that are incarcerated are also allowed time in a more natural environment, they're much healthier psychologically, emotionally. Their recovery, back into, productive citizens, as they say, is much enhanced. So just there's many studies like these days about the importance of it. So he created that first vision, and as we'll see, it's worked out in quite a few places.
Thank you so much. That was very interesting. And just to share with all of us one important fact, that the concept of the natural lifestyle and the eco villages, the community centered around togetherness and, of course, ecology. Yeah? The concept came up officially only in 1992, post the Rio Earth Summit. So it's in 1966 that, you know, he was in a visionary way thinking about the next. But how, what can you also share a little bit on the process of how actually it manifested? And then I'll come to Gaurangaji to tell more about eco villages and the building pillars.
I think for us is just simply we practice. Guranga mentioned yoga. We particularly practice bhakti yoga. Bhakti yoga means the yoga of devotion or practical action. So I think based on an understanding that I want to spiritualize my life, I want to change the priorities. I mean, we can see this whole COP15 event is built around the fact that we are destroying the natural environment. So the question comes up, why are we destroying the natural environment? As Guranga mentioned, because we think we're the controllers and it's our property. But if we're actually understanding, no, we're part of the system. We're not the controllers of the system. We're not meant to be the dominators of the system. We're part of the system. Then naturally, we're going to live in a much a different way. So the unfolding of the process, I think, first and foremost, really is a question of one dedicating oneself to a different set of values. And when that comes forward, and then the door opens in so many ways. So Guranga is particularly going to talk about Govardhan Eco Village, which really is our one of maybe two or three preeminent eco villages around the world, eco communities. And it's because a few people said, let's make a difference. How can we put this into place? So I think that's the essential thing. I think it was Margaret Mead that said, never doubt a small group of committed people can change the world. She said, indeed, that's all that ever has. So a small group of committed people can really make a difference. So that's the essential process. The clarification of what the values are, and then I think making decisions based on those, and then the world comes around and God comes around to help us.
Wow, very beautiful. And that reminds me of a very beautiful um, अकेले चल पड़े थे और कारवां बन गया. So we started alone, and then eventually it becomes a whole community together with a bunch of committed people, of course. Thank you so much. And over to the next question for you know, Gaurangaji here. This is the photograph of a very beautiful eco village from Hungary. It's called Krishna Valley. And there is a very beautiful question that I have here. Like, what what are eco villages, and what are the building pillars for eco villages? Because you have got one to reality with, of course, our spiritual father, Radhanath Swami. So, would you like to share something?
The essential three pillars are the economic dimension, the sustainable dimension, and the social dimension. That's like a basic thumb rule. Within these three, there are further domains. So let us try to understand how the world has changed in the last 200 years. In the year 1800, the world population was 1 billion. In 1930, after 130 years, it became 2 billion. From 2 billion to 3 billion took another 30 years, and in 1960, the world population became 3 billion. Then 1975 it became 4 billion, 87 it became 5 billion, 99 it became 6 billion, and 2010 it became 7 billion. We are soon hitting the 8 billion mark, coming soon. One of my friends, Desh Pandey, who's a serial entrepreneur and a philanthropist based out of Boston, is on the board of MIT. he shared a very interesting perspective. He said, if you divide this 8 billion population of the planet into two sections, only 2 billion have disposable income. All the businesses which are competing and trying to grab the eyeballs, and as they say, market share, they're all fighting it out in this 2 billion. And therefore, for this 2 billion, for them to expand their market share and grow their business, because across this pavilion we have the business and finance part,
Very busy.
very busy. So for businesses to grow, you need number one, innovation. So the step one for any business to stay relevant is innovation. When there is innovation, step two, there is impact. And then when there is impact, there is relevance, and then there is impact. So if a business does not innovate, it does not remain relevant. And if a business does not remain relevant, it cannot create impact. That is for these 2 billion people. But for the remaining 6 billion, they are the ones, as they call different names, global south, or marginalized, last mile, whatever names you may call them. But they are the ones struggling with four things: food, water, energy, waste. Then from this comes education and healthcare and this and that, so many long list. Those who are deprived, this is the 6 billion. For them, the list is little different. For businesses, innovation comes first, but for them, lack of water, lack of sanitation, lack of food. So therefore, for them, relevance is first. If I don't provide them water, they are not going to be able to even think about what is the latest business innovation happening or not. So therefore, relevance with respect to providing the right solutions for the problems they are facing comes first. Once you have identified that yes, this segment of the society in this part of the world needs water, then how to provide them water, that may require innovation. So relevance first, innovation second, then there is impact. So therefore, you know, for those who are extremely successful business wise, those who are at the top end of the pyramid, they have to see the needs of this 6 billion population of the planet. And therefore, what are eco villages? Eco villages are efforts, role models, working models created to demonstrate how we can live in a way that the divide between this 2 billion and the 6 billion can be bridged. If the 2 billion had lived life with harmony with the self, harmony with divine, harmony with nature, and harmony with community, then this drastic 6 billion and 2 billion divide may have never happened. So that is known as an intention with respect to harmonizing needs, water, energy, and waste. Then the communities are established. So therefore, there is a global eco-village network, and they bring together different eco-villages which are existing in different parts of the world. Govardhan Eco-Village specifically is a faith-based, Hindu faith-based eco-village where we keep our tradition at the core, and then thanks to the values which flow out as a result of practice of that tradition, we are trying to curate life in such a way that we are actually able to have harmony with respect to economy, sustainability, and social impact. So we call it the S3 impact: spirituality, sustainability, and social impact. So the idea is that with these eco villages, you have an opportunity to bridge and connect the city to the village. With respect to India, people in the city are highly stressed in India, as also in many other cities. So their need is peace. In the village, India has a lot of impoverished people. So the village people, the rural folk in India are looking for paisa or money. So we thought, can we bridge peace and paisa? Can we connect the needs of the city folks to the needs of the villagers? And therefore we thought, let us create an eco village over 100 acres, which will act as a wellness resort for those from the city. They can come and de-stress using Ayurveda, yoga, wisdom, spirituality. And then whatever they spend, whatever they contribute, that can act as transformative for the rural population around. So therefore, we are working with 120 villages around this 100 acres. But in the 100 acres, we have a 120 key resort, air conditioned with all the facilities. Otherwise, you can't get people from the city to come to a village. So sometimes eco villages have a dimension of being idealistic, where only if you are willing to live that life you can stay there. That is one model. But the model which we are following is to enable those who are not interested in sustainability, those who are not interested in social impact. We are providing a platform by which they feel there is something relevant for me here. And when they come there, they become more aware about sustainability dimension and the social impact dimension. So for that, 2017 United Nations World Tourism Organization gave us the award for ecotourism as a catalyst for rural development. So that's the idea of the eco village model which we are running.
Thank you so much for so comprehensively explaining what an eco village is and the building blocks that we have at eco village and particularly Govardhan Eco Village. I love the point where you said that first comes the relevance, then the innovation, and then the impact. And I'm sure with this we'll be able to turn around completely. The pyramid would be bottom up in that sense and providing for the need for those 6 billion impoverished people. Uh, Coming to Anuttamaji here for the next thing, I would just give a short overview of the farm communities and the eco communities around the globe. We have almost 64 plus such green spaces globally, which have been initiated by ISKCON or the faith followers of ISKCON. And the green space comes to almost 18,300 plus acres. So you can imagine the impact that these green spaces can have. Some are huge, yeah. So this is the list of top 10 eco villages in terms of the size that they have. Yes, definitely. A lot of them are improving, learning every day. It's not a complete development, yeah. But then definitely some represent more deeper shades of that particular green. So we'll come to that little later. But first, of course, where it all started was New Vrindavan community, and it's in West Virginia, USA. As you could see, very beautiful photographs here. You can also spot a white peacock there, and I felt that was something which was very amusing. You could see the produce, um, you know, um, what we had at New Vrindavan displayed there. It has a lot of ponds there, but I'm sure it didn't manifest in a day. There were tremendous challenges, especially the ecological challenges. Would you like to share how it happened at New Vrindavan?
So this particular community, can you go back to the chart just
Yeah,
briefly? It's about 2,000 or 2,500 acres
yeah,
in New
2500.
Vrindavan. It's in West Virginia. Go back to the photos. So this particular community was started very early on in terms of our experience in the West in 1968. And this is when two or three of the followers of Bhaktivedanta Swami uh, located a 100-acre farm in West Virginia and had picked up this idea that we should be promoting more simple living, higher thinking, and creating a beginning of an eco village for people to come. So it's developed over the years, and initially, we're talking all for the United States, all dirt roads, very isolated. Appalachia, especially in those times, was not a particularly culturally diverse part of the world. If you were going to go there, I can't imagine trying to start a mosque in 1968 in the rural areas of West Virginia. Would have also faced similar challenges. So there were those issues. My wife tells a story when she first visited New Vrindavan and she wandered down the road doing her meditation, and she sat under a tree. The next thing she knew, an elderly woman came out with a shotgun and said, "You're on my land. Keep moving." So there was a little the kind of cultural issues there that you might meet. If you tell somebody back then we're creating an eco farm, they think there must be something rather strange of what your ideas were. But actually, over time, what's happened in Simba, I found it very striking your description of Governor Eco Village, because the initial idea was very much focused on a rural retreat for almost monastics, people that wanted to really step back from the world and have an opportunity to live closer to nature. But what we've seen in New Vrindavan and other places as well over time is a lot of people come and say, I can't join you full time, but I'd sure love to come on the weekend. Do you have a place I can stay? So I think similar to my visits to Govardhan Eco Village, it's wonderful, beautiful development in terms of the very cutting edge things you're doing, turning plastic bottles into diesel fuel and recycling and preserving all the water and minimal, the bricks that are made locally and the work you do in the 120 villages. There's similarities there in West Virginia where it's really become a pilgrimage site for people from particularly the East Coast and up Canada, Toronto, Montreal. People come with this idea they're looking for something more peaceful. And while they're there, they can learn, hey, we all need to try to take these values back to our workplaces, to our daily day lives, and to our families. And don't just come here like as a vacation, like you're going to the beach. But while you're here, imbibe some of the spiritual values, imbibe some of the ecological values, and take those back. So I think that's really been a little bit the history. And part of the challenge there, and frankly, there's kind of an internal debate because some people's emphasis is, wait a minute, we're just supposed to be living, taking care of cows and living on the land. That's what we do. And other people say, no, 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 this is supposed to be a place that's a spiritual oasis for people to come and get away from the stress of the cities and all of that. So I think there's a healthy dynamism there to try to balance those two aspects. And I think that when we do that well, and it's kind of an ongoing adjustments are needed. You can't just say, okay, we've done it. Like you said, the world changes, what the relevance are changes. But when we have that healthy tension of how do we create that rural environment, ecologically sensitive environment, and at the same time be a place for people to come and learn, then I think we really achieve the balance that eco communities can provide to the world, ours and others as well.
Thank you so much for sharing, the dilemma when it comes to building the faith-based eco-villages. And I'm sure over a period of time in the journey, they realize that it's the two sides of the same coin. So these are the photographs from Brazil. It's called Vrindavan at Parati, Brazil, and it sits in the heart of Amazon forest. and it also has the ocean uh, just next to it, and it's rich in terms of biodiversity and everything. We have Anuttama Prabhu here have who has visited the eco communities in Brazil, and if you would like to share his experience.
Actually, there's three eco villages in Brazil. I visited two of them, and I think they kind of demonstrate the two sides of the coin, as you said. The one, which is the one that's shown here, which is right near the ocean. I visited there just for one day. I was kind of passing through, and I haven't been there for maybe 5 or 6 years. But the core principle there is it's very much off the grid. I mean, people are. This is not a place for a lot of tourists to come and spend a lot of time. I mean, I remember I was given a tour. They said, "Would you like to see where the residents live?" I said, "Sure." So it was reminded me of a tree house that my uncle built for me when I was about 10 years old, and literally in the trees, and the windows were wood that opened and closed, and one room. And I was thinking these people are really dedicated and sincere. So the leader of the community, we sat down on the floor to kind of talk about, no chairs, sat down to kind of discuss a little bit more about the community. And as primarily a city person myself, finding myself in the jungle, I was asking him, well, are there any issues with wild animals? There's any dangers here? And he said, no, it's not such an issue. There are some snakes we have to be careful about. So I looked up, and the roof was kind of about the top of where we are here. I mean, I almost could have, like, I can put my hand up and touch the beam. I'm 6 something, so when I stand up, it's a little low. So I remember looking up as I asked him about snakes, and there was a beam, and I could see the head of a big yellow snake about the size of my fist over here. And then you think about like a barber pole or something, then you don't see anything. And then you see like about 2 feet of a yellow snake, and then nothing. And then 2 feet of a yellow snake. And I realized this is, going through my mind in just a few seconds. And I looked up, and he said that some are dangerous, some are not. I looked up, I said, what about that one? And he looked up and he said, no, that one's okay. I thought, I've never seen a snake that big, like 2 feet away, right above my head. I thought, okay. So this is the meaning of a spiritual community. Maybe you come, you meet a snake that's going to devour you, and you go to your maker or whatever. Maybe that's the definition. And it was a beautiful community, but people are very dedicated to an extremely austere and simple way of life. And I remember they showed me. They said, "Do you want to see our clothes washer?" Another clothes washer. You're in the middle of the jungle. What are you talking about? So they show me where, because it's on a hill near the foothills of the mountain, and the water comes down. And they had like some stone natural thing where the water reached a certain point. It kind of stirred around a little bit, and then it kind of went into the next. So they literally like throw their clothes in here, and they go around for a few minutes, and they take them out and hang them up. That's the clothes bags. So that's one of the communities in Brazil, very spiritually focused, but very much for those people that want to have an austere, back to nature type of lifestyle. The other community, and I don't know if we have some pictures of that here, is in another part of Brazil, just outside of Sao Paulo. And just one thing I'll point out that I found fascinating when I was there, I didn't know that smuggling of exotic tropical birds is one of the big crimes. I think it's like the third most popular thing to try to smuggle out of Brazil. It's a huge problem there. And they were describing to us, sometimes they get these long, like plastic pipes that you see in construction, and they literally force the birds into these pipes, and then some will have a few holes in there for oxygen, and then just send 100 birds in a pipe, and I don't know how many pipes at one time. So the government is trying to crack down on this. In our community there in Brazil, they formed a relationship with the government. When they rescue these birds, they bring them to our eco farm, and they have the system set up there to gradually reintroduce the birds into their natural environment, because they've been all living in cages by the smugglers, and I guess a lot of them were raised there before they smuggle them out. The birds are kind of paranoid, if you would. They don't want to fly around, so they have this very simple, natural, large cages of maybe the size of this area here, and they bring the birds there, they release them there, and they initially feed them in the cage because they're afraid. And after a few days, they put the food outside the cage. So they fly out, get their food, and fly back. And after a couple of weeks, they just kind of get used to being free, and then they can fly away again. So it's a kind of wonderful partnership again. That in one example, of things that eco communities can do, eco villages, eco farm projects can do to help address the issues that we face in the urban environment. How do we integrate with nature in a positive way?
Oh,
These are,
that
these are big birds. I mean, I don't know what kind of pipes they have that they smuggle them out, but these all varieties, like the kind of beautiful birds you see, like in National Geographic photography, these gorgeous birds that somehow people are smuggling and killing because somebody died in the process, but they're reintroducing them back to their natural habitat.
wow, and I'm just feeling what a bird may be feeling post they realize that now they'll be free. It's very beautiful and very inspiring, perspective that you shared about how, in true sense, the service could be. And we talk about biodiversity. It is very meaningful. Um, Definitely beauty, which is a blessing of nature to the beings, and how it becomes a curse if people just want to exploit that beauty rather than respect it and have gratitude for nature that it has granted that beauty to some being. Thank you for sharing that. And with the snake thing, I also remember my first encounter when we shifted to Govardhan Eco Village, but they were not the big ones. They are the small ones and quite manageable. Almost 95% are non-poisonous.
That, that leaves 10%.
Yeah. But then we were trained, how to have respect for every being, and inside not feel fearful to them. So these are the two most important principles that we are trained about, of living in harmony with all of the beings in nature, not getting insecure, not being fearful, at the same time respecting their space. These two principles that we follow at Golden Village. So now, coming to Govardhan Eco Village, these are few photographs for you from Govardhan Eco Village, and the first one on the slides was also Govardhan Eco Village. It was the aerial view. Yeah, you can see all of the green buildings here. You could see the walkways here. You could see the agriculture research farm that we have inside. To entice you more, imagine yourself at a 90 million liters capacity of rainwater harvesting pond. You rise in the morning where the sun is shining and you're at this pond. There are all birds chirping around, and it's winter. So in India, you will find a lot of migratory birds there. So that's the view. So I'm sure some of the eco villages here are unique in terms of the deeper shade of green that they represent in terms of sustainability. Would you like to share a little more on the biodiversity and the ecosystem restoration effort, and how it also has been made relevant to the 100 villages close by?
Thank you, Dr. Aditi. Just to give you a deeper context, that Radhanath Swami shifted to downtown temple in Chowpatty in 1988. So it was a small temple which started in downtown Mumbai. Around the same time, he started searching for farmland for starting an eco farm. But it took almost 10 years of searching more than 3 to 400 pieces of land all across Maharashtra, that finally in 1998 we found a 50-acre land on the outskirts of Pune in a place called Dond. And 98, 99, 2000, 2001, in those 4 years, there was a lot of effort to transform that land. But as Anuttama Prabhu mentioned, the priority at that time was we were preparing for Y2K. The world was going to come to an end. and you had to find your own food. So that was the priority, growing your own food. And interestingly, we found 25 families, all initiated and practitioners of our faith, who were from farmer families. And we were lucky to find them, and we thought so. But in 2001, these 25 families who are traditionally from farmer backgrounds, several generations have been doing farming, they all came together and registered a protest saying, our forefathers, like our immediate grandfathers, have all been doing NPK farming, and they have experienced excellent result. Now, you guys following Hare Krishna or whatever are now suddenly telling us do organic farming only because it's good for the soil, it's good for this, good for that. Okay, all that may be theoretical, but we don't see the effect because when we were doing with our chemical farming, we would get 3 times the yield. And you guys are forcing us to do this. They were our own followers, practitioners, but they walked out of the concept of organic farming because they just felt it is not going to work in terms of numbers. And in 2001, overnight, 25 families walked out, and we were left with 30 cows and 2 monks and 3 workers to take care of all the 50 acres. It was a beautiful land right next to a flowing river. It couldn't have been better location. But that farm was eco-friendly, but not ego-friendly. And our first farm went through a disaster, not because of the sustainable or spiritual dimension, but because of the social dimension. So therefore, there were lessons learned from that. 2001 to 2003, we started searching for new lands. And we again went through almost 200 pieces of land. Then finally in 2003, we settled down with this one. So in 2003 to 2009 period, 6 years, we only focused on 2 things: creating buy-in amongst those who were inside, and only allowing those who are totally convinced that protecting biodiversity, preserving biodiversity, and organic farming and natural methods, that is going to be the focus. If you are in sync with this vision, you come in. The second thing, we made extra efforts to reach out to the community of farmers around us. So in that 6 year period, our activity was very simple: following our spiritual practices. Second, agriculture, organic. Third, 25 to 30 cows were there, taking care of them. That's it. So we did not go ahead in any expansion mode in that period, because from the first eco village experience, we realized that the most important part of the community is to make sure that there is stakeholder agreement, there is buy-in, everybody is in sync with the vision. Otherwise, you go in some direction and the leader is saying, everyone follow me, and then you look around and nobody's there. He's the only guy moving around. So therefore, in 2009, that is when Radhanath Swami started expressing that I think we should now move in the direction of creating a retreat center. Now, for those of you who are from America and Europe and Canada, this is a very common word. All of you are aware of this. I had never heard that word. When I first heard the word retreat center, I thought he's talking of a hospital or something, treat. So then I told him maybe we should tell the Bhaktivedanta hospital to make it. He says, no, no, this is not hospital. This is where you rejuvenate and take a break and everything. So that is when we decided to add the eco dimension, because till then it was known as Govardhan Farm. So we added the sustainability dimension. And believe it or not, our finance team was not convinced. They thought this whole farm is kind of some kind of a passion, private, deep passion of Radhanath Swami. He tried in outside of Pune, it didn't work. He somehow obsessed and wanting to again continue with that. So two, three monks, 20, 25 cows, and few supporting workers, they are happy in that farm. They are not asking us for money. They are doing what they are doing, and they will live happily ever after. But when Radhanath Swami said, we need some funding to create a retreat center, the finance team was not amused at all. And their first argument was, Maharaj, you already tried once, it didn't work out. I don't think we can afford this luxury of investing in an experiment where nobody has ever seen it ever becoming successful. So, but Radhanath Swami was insisting. So there was no money to do research. So there was a monk who had saved some money, and he donated 200,000 rupees from his savings so that I can go around and do some research. And then we connected with those who are sustainability experts, and then gradually we could understand that one of the best ways to create the retreat center would be to make with compressed stabilized earth blocks. If you Google CSEB, compressed stabilized earth blocks, which consists of 7.5% cement, 3% lime, grit powder, and remaining is locally sourced mud. Then, without using any energy, you can, without any firing, we have created almost 500,000 bricks on site at the eco village. We did not use plaster, we did not use paint, because plaster and paint is one of the biggest culprits in adding to the embodied energy. A typical brick wall with plaster and paint, it consumes 72 megajoules per kilogram of energy, as against compressed stabilized earth block, only 0.275 megajoules per kilogram of embodied energy. So that was the first major dimension we went in terms of green building. And the compressed stabilized earth block walls are known as breathing walls. So there are micropores through which there is a permeation, and in summer or winter there is a 4 to 7 degree drop in the temperature when you have these kind of earth blocks. Then the second dimension was the water. As all of us know, that there is only 1.1 quadrillion acre feet of fresh water available. 97.5% of the water is salty water, only 2.5% is fresh water, out of which 99.7%. So if you want to have fresh water, it is only 0.5% of that 2.5%. So we decided that we should conserve water, and we had a rainwater harvesting pond which we created. Another interesting realization we had, in India, in 748 districts, the government has a scheme for practically 800 million farmers, rural people. What is that scheme? That for every farmland, the government will fund a rainwater harvesting pond. But the scheme is embedded in such complex terminology and bureaucratic language, even educated people couldn't figure out what that scheme is. Till one of the bureaucrats revealed to me and then we could apply for that. So therefore, the intentions are good, but typically in application implementation, it falls through. So we had a hydrogeological survey, and through that we found this places where the pond should be, where the bore wells are, open wells should be, and there is a very close correlation between water and organic farming. Because if you do NPK farming, then during the rainy season, the rainwater runoff percolates underground, and it pollutes the groundwater. And similarly, when there is sewage, because it's a rural place, you can dump sewage anywhere, but the E. coli percolates and it pollutes the groundwater. And you have all kinds of diseases which come. So, along with hydrogeological survey, rainwater harvesting, we had to take care of the waste. So, the waste we took care in terms of three ways. First is food waste, second is gray and black water waste, and third is plastic waste. For plastic waste, we have a pyrolysis plant which converts the plastic into diesel oil, low grade diesel, which we can mix and match with our generator oil and somehow save the overall usage of oil. With respect to black and gray water, we had a soil biotechnology plant, which is a patent of IIT Mumbai. And in the soil biotechnology plant, there is a use of geophagous earthworm bioreactor and root bacteria, and that converts all of the sewage water into fish fit water. And we generate 40 million liters of fish fit water, the treated water which we use for irrigation. So, therefore, one of the caveats in this is the input with respect to the wastewater cannot be above a certain threshold of chemical composition. And therefore, in our retreat center in our community, we have certain restrictions on how much of chemical detergent and other things can be used. So that is one of the big issues with this. But there are ways of overcoming that also. But anyway, the results have been very good. The BOD and COD levels so far have been very well under control. And one of the problems in any community is food waste, but there is a way of converting this food waste into compost, and that is known as SBT, or solid bio waste technology. So in this way, these are some of the ways in which we are processing the waste. And the fourth element of the eco village after food, water, waste is energy. And with respect to energy, we tried few things. One was biogas plant, because we have almost 100 cows and bulls. So with the cow dung and the food waste, we could run, biogas plants. The another thing we tried was ADPM, animal driven prime mover, where the bull moves around a gear based shaft and it pulls water from underground. So instead of putting motor, you can also utilize the power of the bull to bring the groundwater out for irrigation and for other uses. It was very successful and very useful. You could also utilize and showcase the power of the bull. But the problem was the bull was active. The guy behind the bull got tired. And we couldn't convince them to continue. So ultimately it fell apart. So if you ask me, we have tried so many eco-friendly things, but in each of these there are so many problems because of lifestyle changes and people's expectations having changed. A patient human society having become super impatient. So it is always those human dimensions which have resulted in failure. Just like we created a cob house, pure earth, no cement at all. We thought at least 2 3 houses we should have pure earth, foundation stones, no cement, only earth, and you could smell, the fragrance. And on top, we used only rice thatch. It can't be more romantic in terms of eco-friendly. But two problems. The rats loved the smell of the rice thatch. All night they were having their party. And the guests who would check in would check out next day morning. And they say, hey, it's too eco-friendly. And the walls, they smelled so good that it would attract all kinds of insects, including scorpions, including other kinds of termites. So what we realized is just changing infrastructure and making it eco-friendly without transforming the human spirit and consciousness and expectation doesn't work, because when you say eco-friendly means people need to feel harmony with nature and also feel comfortable with the biodiversity around. So we created buildings which attracted biodiversity inside the building, but people were not ready to live with that biodiversity. And so we broke down those three cob houses, instead built compressed stabilized earth blocks, three beautiful bungalows. And one of those bungalows, Will Smith came and stayed recently. So the bungalows is what people prefer more than absolutely rustic, pure mud houses. So these are some of our experiences with respect to food, water, energy, and waste. And of course, we have solar, but we didn't keep the backup, but we kept the solar. Almost 70%. Another strange law Maharashtra has: you can't give back. You can't give back to the grid. Why? Maharashtra State Electricity Board, powerful lobbies, they have put a ceiling on how much alternative energy you can generate. That is another big joke. We are in a capacity to add more solar, but you can only do up to 70%. Otherwise, Maharashtra State Electricity Board is afraid they will go bankrupt. So these are some of the ground realities with respect to eco.
Thank you so much for bringing in the first-hand experience of Govardhan Eco Village here. And I would also like to share one experience here, that how these houses are living houses. And you share the house with all of the insects and spiders and all. And at Govardhan Eco Village, all of these spiders, when we observe them, they are of different sizes. And then we saw the webs that these spiders make, and then we gave denominations to all of these houses that these spiders have. Some have just one room, some have one room kitchen, some have 1 BHK, some have 2 BHK, and some have castles also there. So you'll find all of the varieties when it comes to these spiders. You'll find 55 plus species of butterflies there, which have been spotted. And butterflies tell the health of the ecosystem, yeah, because they are the most sensitive beings. If the pollution increases in the ecosystem, they are the first ones to vanish from the ecosystem. And so are birds. So we have spotted around 65 plus species of birds in Govardhan Eco Village, and some of them are also migratory bird. I remember we saw cherry tomato tree growing up, which we never planted in Govardhan Eco Village. Passion fruit tree, creeper rather. It needs a very special kind of bee, which is dark blue in color, for its cross pollination. And we have them a lot at Govardhan College. So it's very beautiful. The flower smells amazing. It has amazing fragrance. So I'm sure that this will all entice you enough to have a visit to Govardhan Village next. Yeah. Sure, sure, please.
So the question is, what was the difference between in the first effort, outskirts of Pune, where we had the 25 families, and what's different in these new set of people? One of the biggest differences is this new set of 25 to 30 families had no background in farming. They were fresh, they were open, and they were willing to be trained. So their openness to be trained was most important, number one. Number two, in this second effort, we also collaborated uh, professionally. So if you want to ask me, my strongest lesson learned in creating this eco village is, as practitioners of faith tradition, we are always in a position of giving knowledge to the world, whether it's a Hindu guru or a rabbi or a priest or an imam. We are always giving knowledge. We are in the mood of giving. We are in the position of gurus or teachers. So sometimes we fail to recognize that there are many experts in different domains. So just because I'm an expert in theology and spirituality doesn't make me an expert in sustainability. That was a major switch in this second version of the Eco Village, where we took the humble position and followed one mantra: collaboration. Collaboration and convergence. These are the two most crucial words to create impact today. Convergence means UNEP is doing something, UNDP is doing something, UNICEF is doing something, they're all following parallel tracks. So convergence means within the eco village, different departments, how they can have better dialogue with each other, so that we are not reworking the wheel. So therefore, collaboration is with outside, convergence is inside. And this problem happens across all governments, across all corporations. Lack of communication creates lack of coherence and convergence. So convergence is important. So we enhanced our collaborations. So one of our devotees, Krishna Chandra Prabhu, Rishikesh Mapatlal, is the chairman of an organization called BIAF, Bharat Agro Industries Federation. What BIAF does, it was started by his father in 1968. It is an expert in rural development in 300,000 villages in India. So we had an expert right in our own backyard, but we never bothered to connect. So we brought BIAF in. So they have like hundreds of experts. So they are the ones who are supporting us in our journey, and they are the ones who trained our people in organic farming, in rural development, in reaching out to all these underprivileged farmers, training them in four types of farming, so that they always have some kind of income all through the year. Because if you are rain fed economy, if you are monsoon dependent economy, if monsoons fails, what do you do? So you have to have a backup plan. So the insurance for farmers is in terms of short term, medium term, long term cropping. So short term is agriculture, medium term is floriculture, where you have flowers. The plants don't perish, but it keeps giving flowers at different seasons. Long term is horticulture, which is fruits. So therefore, when you have all these three, that is known as intercropping, and that typically is what is known as Wadi agriculture, where 1 acre farmland, that farmer, along with a few cows or bulls, can create enough cow dung, cow urine, which can create his own fertilizer, insecticides in house, and he can maintain himself, and we help in market linkage. So we train them in organic farming, we train them in getting out of their habit of NPK farming, we handhold them so that they understand which kind of farm, which kind of plants to grow in which season. So all of that training, along with the initial seed funding for all of this, we kind of help incubate organic farming, in other words. So we have helped grow farmers' income. So interestingly, Palghar district where we are, it is a district right next to Mumbai. Mumbai is the financial capital. Next to the financial capital, this district has a population of 3 million, but has a per capita income of only $1 a day. Highly impoverished. And we have almost 70% people are from the tribal communities, native communities. So they need major help at all levels, and that's what we are trying to do. Get them first into organic farming. For the women, we do women empowerment by helping them in having self-help groups where they come together and they are taught various skills. Then the youth, we have created skill development programs. So we train them in 75 kinds of skills so that they can become their own entrepreneurs. Then, although that district gets 3,500 millimeters of rain, unless they are taught and trained how to do watershed management, as soon as the monsoon is over, you won't find any water around. So we train them in watershed management also. So the most important thing we are doing is in the social sector. In this social sector, the biggest challenge is many initiatives are donor driven. The donor says, or the grant, person who's giving the grant says, I have some money for this. You do something. It is like you go to a hospital and the hospital says, oh, you want eye surgery, but we have a heart surgeon available. Would you mind getting a heart surgery? So in the development sector, this is a big issue. That even if you go to companies for CSR, corporate social responsibility, they say, oh, but we have some lot of funding available for this particular. So can you create a project out of it? So it is like saying we have a heart surgery. Can you create a heart trouble so that we can perform your surgery? So one of the biggest challenges for CSOs and NGOs is, as I said, that 6 billion is not sufficiently, respected by that 2 billion. And more conversations need to happen between that 2 billion and the 6 billion so that they are not seen as some kind of trouble or burden or guys who couldn't manage, on their own or whatever. But with better planning and with better empathy, and that's where faith traditions come into picture. Because what faith traditions can really add is that dimension of empathy, of compassion, genuinely. Otherwise, in India, it is 2% of your net profit has to go into CSR, which translates into $2 billion per year for all the corporates in India put together. 2 billion per annum. But just one department, tribal care department of government of India, has an annual budget of $45 billion, out of which 60% goes unused every year because of lack of enough projects, whatever. So I'm saying that with respect to the governments in the development sector, funding is never an issue. It is always the three I's. You have to have the right inspiration, integrity, and then intelligence. Then you can actually, implement things and experience the transformation.
Thank you so much. You have brought in the aspect of the multiple stakeholder and multi-level engagement, particularly collaboration, is what you have focused here in your by sharing the experience at what we had at Govardhan Eco Village. Just to just in the interest of time, if we can keep now, just answers to next two questions coming in, very short. And I wanted to give a little more time for the question and answers here. So these are photographs. Yeah, yeah. About Hungary, would you like to?
Yeah. Okay, just to round it out a little bit, then some questions, just 60 seconds. To highlight Krishna Valley in Hungary is another one of our major eco village projects. This is in the center of Europe. And you talked a lot about collaboration. I think this is a community that had similar experiences with trying to do things without necessarily understanding what worked on the ground. And I've never lived there. I visited several times, and one of the founders of that community talked about initially was a completely deforested agriculture project that the ground had been burnt out, the forests were gone. So they began very much focusing on reintroducing a forest and trying to understand how they could use the land. And at one point they had the idea, well, we're just going to plant pumpkins. So they this huge thousands and thousands of pumpkins that they made some contract with a professional company to come. But when the company came, because they were doing organic, I believe at that time, and the land wasn't so good, they had thousands of pumpkins produced, and the company came to buy the pumpkins and said, but these are two different, there's the little ones, there's big ones, there's odd, we don't want any of these pumpkins. So they said the first year practically they had to live on pumpkins for like the next so many months. Was it pumpkin pie, pumpkin, vegetable curries, pumpkin juice, pumpkin everything, pumpkin. So then they realized that we have to collaborate. We need to learn more what this particular unique function of this community can produce, what this land can produce. And since then, over the last so many years, they're now one of the leading eco communities, eco farms in Europe, and they've a lot of collaboration with the government. So they're bringing students there, they're bringing government agents that are trying to understand what's working on the ground and benefiting, so they can learn what have you been doing, how's it worked in the local area, and also bringing in these experts that oftentimes know things that the local members of the community don't. So it really has been a profitable benefit. And I know this community has, I think now that 30,000 pilgrims or visitors come every year from around Hungary and around Europe to learn about this community, to see how can we apply some of these things that you've learned in our own projects, in our own homes, and our own villages. So that process of collaboration is very important.
Yeah, I'm sure the experiential learning model with these eco villages is very, very powerful. And in fact, I share the same experience here at Gordon Eco Village. Even at Gitanagri, we have a lot of young volunteers who write me very often, that they would like to do something with the eco village. They would like to do internship. We have collaborations with CUNY, we have collaborations with University of Utah, Princeton University, many of these leading universities abroad, as well as the universities in India, where students come and spend their time and learn a lot about the natural lifestyle, the architecture that we have, and the ecosystem restoration process which is happening at all of these eco villages. So, just after this, this is the Sharanagati Eco Village at Ashcroft, Canada. This is one of the huge, this is the largest one, 3,000 acres. And it's like a collection of some 50 families taking care of that much of green space. And just one thing I would like to add here is all of these eco villages have maintained the flavor of indigenous culture wherever they are. Either it be food, the kind of produce that they grow and the dishes that they make, um, everything. So it's very beautiful out there. With this, open the floor is open to questions. Some more questions. I'm sure the curiosity is something which is there with all of the great creative people. So over to all of you. Maybe we can have two, three questions.
Awesome. Um, you had mentioned how a lot of your eco villages are set up so that urban folks can kind of come and have a retreat. Do you have any eco villages in cities? Like I think about, like I live in the city and sometimes it's very difficult to even get out. Like I don't drive. Um, so I'm just curious if you have those in cities and what if you do, what your experience with that would be.
The question is, are there any eco villages in cities? And so that it's easier for people. In Seattle, they used to have one very close to the Samamish temple, and it was hardly 20 minutes away. And Harivilas Prabhu, who's one of the ISKCON leaders, was actually showcasing the whole thing. But they then moved to another place, another location, which is almost 40 minutes away. So that is one example in North America. Then in India, we actually are embarking, or we have already started a whole concept called green temples. So I'm a fellow of the Indian Green Building Council. So the World Green Building Council has its branches all across the world. So the Indian Green Building Council has different systems of rating green buildings, like platinum, gold. Like that, for all the religious places, they have created one category called Reverend, IGBC Reverend. They have 35 criteria, and those 35 criteria span across water usage, energy, HVAC, other kinds of paving and wastewater management, surface runoff, other things. So all of those put together is part of what we call as uh, IGBC Reverend certification. So ISKCON has its global initiative led by Anuttama Prabhu, and within India, that initiative is being implemented with a collaboration with IGBC, where over the next 2 years we want to make 25 temples green. Already we have accomplished this in 6 temples. So 6 temples have now gone through the whole process. So the way it happens is they come, they'll see your as is situation, then recommend what changes need to be made. Then the temples have to figure out whether they can afford that. But there may be some capex involved, but the long run OPEX savings, they are much higher. So then they do go through that, they come again, do a second level of certification, and then we try to follow that. So that model is definitely happening when it comes to actual city. And another important thing in this city temples, when it becomes green, is messaging, because temples and mosques and synagogues are places where thousands of people visit. The footfall is huge. So therefore, as many people who visit these city temples, they may be able to see a small element of eco compared to a 100-acre farm. But a small component can definitely teach them a lot of principles about sustainable living.